This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a book with quite the reputation.
Oh, yes. Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. Legendary for being tough.
Definitely tough, but also, people say, incredibly rewarding. We've heard philosophers talk about it with this mix of, awe and maybe a bit of fear.
That sounds about right. But we're not just trying to decode a dense text here.
No, think of this deep dive more like tracing a journey. A really surprising, sometimes twisty journey that consciousness itself takes.
Exactly. And we're using excerpts from Terry Pinker's translation to help us navigate. It provides a really clear path, actually.
So our mission today is basically to unpack the stages consciousness goes through. From simple awareness, like just seeing something,
All the way up to what Hegel famously calls absolute knowing. We'll look at the key experiences, the shifts, the transformations along the way.
following Hegel's map, essentially. If you've ever thought about how you really get to know the world, or yourself in relation to it, well, this is kind of the deep-cut philosophical version of that process.
It really is. And it's a story about how experience isn't passive. It pushes consciousness. It forces it to confront contradictions in its own understanding.
And these contradictions aren't failures, are they? They're the engine.
Precisely. Consciousness has to resolve them, purify itself, and that's how it moves forward, gets elevated towards, well, genuine knowing. It learns from its mistakes, you could say.
Okay, let's dive in. Where does this journey begin? Seems like it should start with the simplest thing.
And it does. Hegel starts with sensuous certainty, that immediate feeling of just knowing what's right in front of you.
Like this thing, right here, right now, you feel absolutely sure the warmth of the sun, the color red.
That raw sensation seems undeniable, doesn't it?
Totally. But then the source immediately throws a wrench in the works. As soon as you try to actually say it or pin it down,
It starts to unravel. Take now. The source points out, the very instant you try to grab a hold of now, this present moment you're so certain of,
by the time you said now,
it's already gone. It's become then. The now you meant has slipped away. It's past.
Okay, what about here? Like this tree is here seems solid.
Well, the source asks, what if someone else is standing nearby, pointing at the same spot, but saying, the house is here?
Ah, right. So here isn't specific to the tree. It's just a placeholder.
Exactly. Here and now are universals.
Yeah.
Anyone can use them for anything. So that feeling of absolute unique certainty, it dissolves when you try to express it.
Contradictions pop up immediately in what felt most certain.
You got it. Sensuous certainty feels powerful, but it's knowledge of something kind of ineffable, something that vanishes the moment you try to make it concrete or universal.
Yeah.
You can't build stable knowledge just on that feeling.
So consciousness has to move on. It gets pushed to the next stage, perception.
Right. Now, it's not just fleeting sensations. It's dealing with things that seem to have multiple properties.
Like an apple isn't just red. It's red and round and maybe sweet and crisp.
Exactly. And the source talks about how these properties are related. They exist together through what Pinker translates as an indifferent also.
Meaning they're just kind of lumped together, red, round, sweet. They're just there.
Yeah, consciousness perceives them as co-present, but doesn't immediately grasp the necessary connection, why they belong together in this specific apple. But at the same time, the apple itself is perceived as an excluding one.
It is this apple and not that orange over there. It has a unity.
Right. So perception grapples with this tension. Is the thing just a bundle of separate properties, the also?
Yeah.
Or is it a unified whole, the one?
And that tension, that ambiguity, pushes consciousness further.
It does. It pushes it into understanding. This is where consciousness starts looking behind the curtain, so to speak.
Trying to find the hidden rules, the laws governing things.
Exactly. Looking for the underlying forces. The source talks about the play of forces that explain why things appear the way they do. It posits an inner realm, an essence, behind the outer appearance.
Like gravity is the inner force explaining the outer appearance of the apple falling.
Sort of, yes. Trying to grasp the true nature through concepts like force and law. And this leads to a really wild idea in the source, the inverted world.
Inverted, meaning what?
The idea that the inner reality, the law, or essence consciousness is looking for, might actually be the opposite of what appears on the surface.
Whoa, okay, like what seems good is actually bad underneath. Or attraction is really repulsion.
Something like that. It's a conceptual possibility consciousness entertains. But the reason it moves beyond this stage is crucial.
Why? It seems like a powerful idea that things aren't what they seem.
Because it reveals the instability of relying only on this inner-outer split. The truth isn't just some fixed essence hidden away. The appearance itself, the source says, is unstable, a whole of semblances.
So the essence isn't static, hiding. It's somehow involved in the changing appearances.
Yes. The simple inner-outer distinction doesn't quite cut it. Reality is more dynamic. And realizing this limitation drives consciousness to look for certainty somewhere else. Not just outwards anymore.
But inwards,
Right.
towards itself.
Bingo. This is the massive shift to self-consciousness. Consciousness turns its gaze on itself. It becomes aware of its own awareness, its own I.
It's not just knowing an object, it's knowing that it knows, knowing itself as the knower.
Exactly. And the first, most basic truth it finds is, well, it's almost disappointingly simple. I am I. A tautology.
Just stating its own existence.
Right. But the source shows that this isn't enough. Just being I in isolation isn't the whole story. Self-consciousness, crucially, is characterized by desire.
Desire. Desire for what?
Desire to see itself confirmed, reflected, recognized. It needs validation from the outside, often from other self-consciousnesses. It needs to make its mark on the world and see itself in that mark.
And this is where the idea of the struggle for recognition comes in. The source mentions a trial by death.
Yes. It hints at this. The idea that self-consciousness tries to prove its own certainty, its own independence and worth, by risking its life in a confrontation with another self-consciousness. It's seeking recognition, even at the ultimate cost.
That sounds intense. Does the source elaborate much on that struggle itself?
It touches on how this struggle, while foundational, paradoxically, sublates the truth it seeks. Remember sublate, that Hegelian term, meaning to negate but also preserve and lift up.
Right. So the struggle negates mere life.
Potentially leading to a dead unity if one consciousness is destroyed. But it also preserves the importance of recognition and moves consciousness beyond just being a natural organism. It establishes the social dimension of selfhood.
Okay. So after establishing this need for recognition, self-consciousness tries different ways to be free and certain just within itself, right? The source walks us through some historical examples.
Exactly. Like Stoicism.
Finding freedom by retreating inwards, into pure thought, detached from the messy world.
Yes. Seeking certainty in the abstraction of the I, regardless of external circumstances. But the source suggests this freedom is, well, a bit thin. It's abstract, disconnected.
Limited because it doesn't engage with the world.
Pretty much. Then comes skepticism.
The doubter, the one who negates everything external.
Takes negation to the extreme. Finds certainty only in pulling the rug out from under everything else. Certain only of uncertainty, in a way.
How does the source describe this? I remember it being quite vivid.
Oh, it is. Piggard's translation calls it insensible claptrap. It says the skeptic's acts and its words always contradict each other.
Like man's arguing, it is. No, it isn't. Yes, it is.
Exactly, like a squabble among stubborn children. It negates everything, even its own statements eventually. The insight. Even radical doubt hits a wall. It can't provide a positive foundation for knowing because it ends up doubting itself.
It collapses under its own negativity, which leads to the unhappy consciousness.
Yes. This is a really poignant stage. A consciousness that feels fundamentally split, torn.
Estranged from itself. Or maybe from God, or some ideal it can't reach.
Both, potentially. The source uses powerful language. Infinite longing. Feeling painfully feels itself as estranged. Its thinking isn't clear concepts.
It's described more like feelings, music.
Yeah, like the shapeless roar of the pealing of bells, or musical thinking which does not amount to concepts. It feels its true essence is somewhere else beyond its grasp, but it can't bring that essence into its actual life or thought. It's stuck in this division.
Wow. So this internal division, this longing, it can't stay there forever. Consciousness has to find a way forward.
And it does. It moves to reason.
And reason is what? A new kind of certainty.
It's the certainty, or at least the conviction, that consciousness itself is all reality, that the rational structure of thought is also the structure of the world.
Instead of feeling estranged, it feels at home in the world. It expects to find itself, its own logic, out there.
Exactly. It tries to see its concept, its rationality in the world. The first attempt is observing reason.
Just looking closely at nature, trying to find laws.
Pretty much. Observing physical things like the stone falling, trying to discern the underlying universal law.
Or doing science. The source mentions experiments, right?
Yes, great examples. Like figuring out electricity isn't just about amber or glass, but purifying the concept into purely positive and negative electricity, universal forces.
Or understanding acid and base not just as substances, but through their necessary reaction, how they neutralize each other. Their truth is in their relationship.
Precisely. It's about finding that universal, necessary structure. And the source is pretty tough on shortcuts here.
Like relying on just guessing or probability.
Yeah. Probability, it says, is nothing compared to the necessity truth demands. And analogy, just saying this is like that, isn't good enough either. Reason wants the real deal, the necessary connection.
Okay. And reason also looks at living things, the organic world.
It does. It sees organisms, plants, animals as having their purpose within themselves, own self the purpose. They exist to maintain and reproduce themselves. Teleological.
But there's a problem observing that purpose directly.
Consciousness struggles. It sees the self-preserving activity, but it tends to separate the concept of purpose from the actual messy process. It doesn't quite see the purpose fully realized in the process itself.
This difficulty in seeing the inner concept perfectly mirrored in the outer thing leads to some weird places, doesn't it? The source brings up physiognomy and phrenology.
Yes, definitely products of their time, but philosophically revealing. These were attempts to read the inner spirit directly from the outer body.
Like reading personality from facial features or intelligence from bumps on the head?
Exactly. Physiognomy looked at face, hands, voice. Phrenology focused on the skull shape. The idea was the physical form was a direct sign and organ of the inner self.
But Hegel, or the source here, is pretty critical.
Very sharp critique. It asks, how can the skull be an organ of spirit? It calls the skull a caput mortuum, a dead head.
Ouch. And the point about murder.
Right. You don't commit murder with your skull. It's a tool, maybe, but not the seat of the intention or the act itself in that crude way.
So the deeper point is,
mistaking a static physical thing like the skull for the location or direct expression of dynamic living spirit shows a fundamental misunderstanding. It shows you haven't grasped the concept of spirit itself. You're treating spirit like a mere object.
okay, so observing reason kind of fails to find the concept perfectly embodied out there. What next?
Consciousness realizes it can't just find itself passively. It needs to make itself real. This leads to reason as acting.
It wants to shape the world according to its own purposes, to engender itself by its own activity.
Precisely. To make itself the purpose and reality through its actions, its deeds.
And this naturally leads us into the social world.
Exactly. Welcome to the realm of spirit. This is consciousness entering the social, ethical, historical world, living within a community with shared laws, customs, values.
And initially, this ethical life is described as harmonious, like unalloyed trust.
Yeah, an immediate sense of belonging where the individual feels at one with the people. The community's way of life seems naturally right.
But that harmony doesn't last. The individual starts to see themselves as separate.
The individual self-consciousness awakens to its own uniqueness, its singularity. And suddenly, the established laws and customs, the ethos.
They look external, maybe arbitrary, like abstract theory without actuality.
Yes, no longer felt as their own living substance. And this leads the individual to try and live by their own rules.
The law of the heart. My inner feeling is the true law.
That's the idea. Setting up one's personal conviction or unique feeling as the universal standard everyone should follow.
Which sounds like a recipe for disaster.
And the source confirms it. If everyone follows their own heart, you get conflict. A combat of all against all. Public order becomes an essenceless game of clashing subjective wills.
Individual authenticity turns into chaos.
Oof, a powerful insight, definitely. Then you have virtue trying to fight this chaos, struggling against the way of the world.
Trying to impose the good based on, like, abstract principles or faith.
Yes, but the source is a bit pessimistic. It suggests this struggle often doesn't bring the virtuous person much joy or actual success in the messy reality of the world. Intentions don't always translate.
And human abilities, talents, they're neutral.
The source calls gifts, abilities, powers, universal instruments that are indifferent to the use made of them. They can be used for good or ill. Their nature doesn't guarantee a good outcome.
So consciousness tries another route, finding itself through the work.
Putting yourself out there through your actions, creating something, changing something, pouring your individuality into the universal medium of the world.
But the work takes on a life of its own.
Yes. The source says the work is for other individualities. Once it's out there, it becomes an alien actuality. Others react to it, interpret it, change it.
So your truth isn't just in your intention or the thing itself, it's in how it gets received and transformed.
In a way, yes. The individual finds their universality, their truth reflected back, maybe distorted or dissolved, through the work's interaction with the world. It's a complex feedback loop.
The source also critiques things like honesty and conscience, saying honesty can be simplistic.
Yeah, a kind of honesty that's not getting its thoughts together, reducing complex situations to empty purpose, or judging actions as entirely bad work without nuance.
And it puts tyranny and clever rule-bending in the same boat.
Both are seen as negative relationships to the shared ethical substance. Arbitrary law-giving ignores universality, but cleverly arguing your way out of absolute laws based on subjective feelings is an invalid liberation that also undermines the shared basis of ethics.
This focus on individual insight and freedom, taken to its extreme, leads to the Enlightenment phase. Absolute freedom and pure insight.
That's the connection often made. It's a powerful critical force. Pure understanding dissects everything, tradition, faith, social structures.
Reducing it all to utility, or just arbitrary convention.
Yes, using a language of disruption to tear down the old. But the source shows the terrifying endpoint of this purely negative freedom.
The really grim part, that quote about death.
Unforgettable. The sole work and deed of universal freedom is in fact death. And not just any death, but the coldest, emptiest death of all, having no more meaning than chopping off a head of cabbage or swallowing a mouthful of water.
Just pure negation, consuming everything, including itself. A void.
A devastating outcome. But, Hegel suggests, even this experience is necessary. By knowing the limit, the potential emptiness of this absolute abstract freedom, spirit is forced to move beyond it toward something more concrete that can integrate this insight.
Okay, so where does it go after hitting that nihilistic wall?
To religion.
Religion, how does that follow?
In religion, spirit knows itself as spirit, as absolute essence, but it knows it immediately in the form of immediacy or being. It's grasped through representations, images, stories, not yet fully through concepts.
So it grasps the truth, but not yet in a purely philosophical, rational way.
Exactly. The source mentions stages, like art religion.
Where spirit is seen in beautiful forms, statues.
Yes, representing perhaps specific national spirits initially, then moving towards the universality of their human existence, like in classical Greek sculpture, then revealed religion.
Where truth comes through texts, prophets, signs. Less direct.
Right. But the source points out the limitations here too, using those striking examples.
The warning signs of deception, like priestesses, witches, talking trees, dreams.
Exactly. The fury of the priestess, the inhuman shape of the witches, the voices of trees and birds, the dream. These aren't how necessary truth appears. They are signs of contingency, of truth being mediated by arbitrary external things or subjective states.
So religion grasps the absolute, but grasps it as something other, something revealed to consciousness, not fully grasped by consciousness conceptually.
That's the key limitation. It understands spirit as absolute, but still maintains a separation between the divine object and the knowing subject.
The source also mentions fate briefly, and tragedy.
As forces or structures that point towards an underlying unity or necessity behind the conflicts, tragedy especially starts to bring together the universal law, the concept, and the individual's action and fate, individuality, hinting at a deeper integration.
Which finally, after this whole epic journey, brings us to the destination, absolute knowing.
The grand finale. This is where the unity that was missing, the conceptual grasp that religion represented but didn't fully achieve, is finally realized.
The separation between the knower and the known is overcome.
Yes. Representational thought returns into self-consciousness. The opposition between the object reality out there and the subject, the knowing I, is resolved.
Is this like the beautiful soul from earlier? That consciousness aware of pure knowing?
Good question. No, it moves beyond that. The beautiful soul knew pure knowing, but remained abstract, inactive, ultimately dissolving like a vapor. Absolute knowing is active, concrete. It's spirit comprehending itself as the totality.
So it's the knowing of pure knowing. Self-consciousness understands itself as the true reality.
Precisely. Pure self-consciousness is the genuinely true object. Subject and object are unified in this self-comprehending thought.
And what happens to time? The source said time was the destiny of the spirit that is not yet completed.
In absolute knowing, time is sublated. overcome in a sense because the process is complete, but also preserved and understood within the structure of the whole system. The journey through time is now comprehended conceptually.
Which leads to that incredibly bold claim at the end.
That nothing is truly known unless it's grasped by the concept within this complete system. Consciousness finally understands itself as being all actuality.
And even more radically, that this actuality is only as knowing, reality is the knowing of it.
That's the ultimate point. The distinction collapses. Reality isn't something fundamentally separate from the consciousness that knows it. Reality, in its absolute truth, is this process of spirit coming to know itself.
Wow. Okay, what a journey. Just recapping that arc is mind-bending.
It really is. From the simplest sensation, feeling so certain, through all the struggles of self-consciousness, the need for recognition, the traps of pure inwardness or pure negation.
Then entering the social world, ethics, law, trying to make a mark through action, dealing with the way of the world.
Moving through religion's powerful but representational grasp of the absolute.
And finally arriving at this point where consciousness understands itself as the whole process, where knowing and reality become one.
Yeah.
Absolute knowing.
It's an incredible map of the development, not just of some abstract consciousness, but arguably of how we develop our understanding, facing contradictions, learning, integrating.
Yeah, it's not just dusty old philosophy. These stages resonate, don't they? The moments of certainty that crumble, the desire to be understood, the struggle with social norms, the attempt to find meaning.
Absolutely. Every stage holds a partial truth, but its internal limits push us, or push consciousness, onward to something more comprehensive. It shows how knowledge grows through resolving its own problems.
It's a profound way to think about the relationship between our minds and the world.
Definitely. Which leaves us with that final thought from the source to chew on. If, as Hegel concludes, absolute essence is all actuality, and this actuality is only as knowing.
What does that really imply for you, for your own consciousness? How does it change how you think about the world around you, about reality itself?
What does it mean to fully know something, if knowing isn't just reflecting reality, but in some deep sense is reality? Heavy stuff to ponder. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.